Hello, welcome to the last session. You've done it. Great work. I get to close the show, so this is pretty cool. Anyway, yes, so I am going to be talking about the impact of those ADA Title II updates, the new rule that was created. I'm going to tell you that this is not my favorite topic because I come from a design background. I come from a developer background. Legislation, regulation, compliance is not where I like to live. So, but I think it's important. I think it's important for us to understand where we're starting from, what's being asked of us. But you're going to see me pivot in this conversation away from compliance and what's required of the ADA Title II for me. We're going to talk about how it's going to impact you and decisions you need to make more than what do I need to do to meet this minimum standard. So I hope that's okay. If you need the deep dive in regulation, we have other people for that, including Judy in the back there. Talk to Judy if you want the deep dive into the regulation. Not going to be my specialty, right? But I'm going to try to translate this into what you need to do and how it's going to impact your work going forward. Sound good? Wonderful. Okay, great. I'm also going to probably spin this a bit as well into talking about the intent of what these updates are asking, what the meaning of it is. Not necessarily like, what do I need to do today, checklist style, but like what the intent is, what the reason for the work that's being asked of us is. Because I think that's far more important, because what we're ending up talking about is people, right? Not meeting a regulation, meeting requirements. They help us guide our work, right? Those regulations are there, and you can picture them as kind of the foundation that we build upon in our user experience design and content development. It is not where we stop. We don't meet this requirement and then just we're good, check, we're done, right? This is a process change for you. And it's built on the shoulders of probably, don't want to say generations because I'm going to age myself, but it's probably based on generations of people in similar roles to you cutting costs, right? So it's coming back to hurt us now. That kind of quarter over quarter, like, hey, we need to eliminate costs. We need to do this faster, better. We need to buy this cheaper architecture, whatever that may be, not really relevant, right? It's not because we're lazy. It's not because people before were lazy. It's because there was an operational failure somewhere that forgot that cutting costs has an impact to humans, right? So the intent of this rule, the intent of the ADA Title II updates is meant to not only remediate the debt we've created, but change our process going forward so that we do not have debt and we're not making more problems for people going forward. So. Through the International Association of Accessibility Professionals mentioned previously, it essentially means I have 2 of their certifications that equal a 3rd certification. I'm a designer, developer. Currently at Site Improve, I run a team of our manual testers, our digital accessibility specialists, and our consultants to supplement the software that we produce that does automated checks. That's all you're going to hear of it. Cool. Moving on. So again, I'm coming at this from a person that leads a team of specialists. I'm also coming at this from a person who came originally from higher education as a, believe it or not, Flash developer. Aged myself, did it. So I'm coming from a practitioner who had to fight a lot internally, managing upwards, thank you, Jay, to truly, how do we do this under constraints, right? Like this, they're asking a lot of us through these Title II updates. what can we do to A, make it easier for ourselves, but also work through some of those easy decisions that we need to make to hopefully stop the bleeding, right? We want to stop producing inaccessible content, because the more we create inaccessible content, the longer this work goes, forever, and the more costly it is forever. So that's my longest preamble ever. We're going to just get into it now. So I just said we're not going to talk about the regulations. We're actually going to talk about them just a little bit in my terms, not lawyer terms, because again, not a lawyer. Do not take your legal advice from a graphic design major who turned into a developer. Okay, great. So I'm going to give just a little bit of an overview. A lot of this has already been spoken about in other talks that I'm so happy we're all in agreement on these talks, but you're all going to get a little bit of a different spin on these. But I wanted to start off by saying, and I kind of hit on some of these already, the intent of this is for people. And there is like a legacy going backwards if you look into it, into the pieces of memorandums and other legislation that has happened to lead us up to this point. It is very clear that this is because we want to make people's lives better, right? It's not just arbitrary work. I think I don't have to convince you of that anymore. You're in this room. So I think we're in good standing. But a couple stats: 1 in 4 people in the United States have a disability. That is people who identify as having a disability. So that number is low, because not everybody identifies publicly as someone with a disability. And that's coming from the CDC. That page may be taken down from the website currently. However, it exists. We also have the World Health Organization has a similar stat. It is about 20% globally. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's coming out of my brain, but it's roughly similar to the 25% of people that the US has represented previously as having a disability. That's a lot of people. That's a huge audience if you are speaking about it in terms of like user engagement. If you were to say like, I don't really care about 20%, 25% of the people that come to my website, like you're probably gonna be in trouble with your job, right? So 1 in 4 people, that is not a small measure. And that is a spectrum of disability, and people are complex, right? So we're talking about diverse abilities of people, diverse people that need to consume the information and the content that you are creating in interesting ways, right? In non-linear ways. That's scary, I understand. We're gonna get there, don't worry, we're gonna fix it. There was a series of memorandums and things from the federal government a while ago that a digital first government is a necessity. So this was dictating kind of, it was reiterating the importance of a digital first program in state and local government, especially. So that idea of standing in line in an office to get information or to fill out a form should be disappearing, because technology, because the way people consume information today, because it's more secure, better, faster, more efficient, right? So building a digital first public experience to better serve the American people. That was a memorandum that was released, again, a while ago, but it's reiterating the importance of people in this process. And then the Title II updates came along. This is an update to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, for state and local government to better serve their communities. So you'll notice a consistent theme here of your communities, right? The constituents that report into you in whatever way. This is the reason we're doing this work. Yes, I see nodding, good. All right, so let's talk about what the Title II updates actually say in terms of technical standard requirement, because this was the unique part about the update, is that they actually determined a technical standard for us to aim for, again, as the foundation, right? As the starting place for our work. So on the screen here, we've got a spectrum timeline from 1999 to 2023, and the WCAG versions, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, was deemed the technical standard that is also consistent with international standards, as well as federal government standards. It's the technical document we reference the most. You've heard it so many times these last 2 days, I'm sure. But we started with WCAG 1.0, went to 2.0, and 2.1 is the version of WCAG that the Title II of the ADA now says is the technical standard that we are aiming for. Again, this was a little bit of a race, right? 2.2 had actually come out already, but just barely, and it was kind of too new at that point to incorporate into the Title II updates. The good news is the 2.0 series builds upon each other. So the versions of WCAG that are outlined here on this slide, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, build upon each other. If you aim for WCAG 2.2, you will include all of 2.1 and all of 2.0. So you today can go set your standard at 2.2 as a future-proofing mechanism. There was not that many differences between 2.2 and 2.1. I think there were 9 additions as success criterion. Most of them were AAA. And one was a removal of a success criterion. So, cool, right? Was it 9? Okay, 6A and AA. Thank you, Glenda. So not that many, not that much difference, and they're actually pretty easy to meet, like Judy had said in her presentation yesterday. So I would highly recommend setting your standard at 2.2. You do not have to say 2.1 in order to meet the compliance here. It is assumed and known that these build upon each other. So if you are going above and beyond the version number, you're good. Highly recommend it. I have a little note under here about WCAG 3.0. It is in the works. It's going to be a complete departure of how we test and analyze compliance. That will not be the recommendation from the W3C for many years, as heard from Sean Henry when I talked to her last. So keep it in mind. Don't spend any more time thinking about it today than that. That is coming. Cool. We'll keep an eye on it for when it's recommended, and then we'll have to kind of reinvent our processes in order to assess that. I assume there will be a long time where we will be doing them in parallel. That's an assumption on my part. All right, so WCAG versions, got that covered. We can set it to 2.2, and we're good for what we are being asked of in the ADA Title II update. We also have a thing called the WCAG levels, right? So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, again, acronyms. I hate acronyms. I always try to say it out. But these levels are where the severity of issue comes into play and the level, I guess, the level of conformance we are setting. So we have single A, double A, and triple A. And these map directly to the success criterion within the WCAG standards. So each success criterion will be rated at one of these levels. So currently, we are aiming for level double A compliance in the Title II minimum requirement. That is also cumulative. So to be level double A compliant, you also need to be level single A compliant. So you need to do both. So A and double A equal double A compliant or conformant, however you want to say it. So what's nice is that these single A, they're broken out by severity, right? So single A are issues that block a user, or they are extremely detrimental to a user. They can't consume the content you are creating. It is a hard stop, mostly. The double A standards are issues that create a negative or ineffective experience. It's annoying, and usually your users are going to have to adapt in order to get the content in some other fashion. And then the AAA standards, which are above and beyond the current conformance compliance kind of line in the sand, go above and beyond that standard, but they do benefit a huge amount of people. And they're usually much easier to deal with because there are no exceptions in them. They are very black and white. They are very yes or no types of checks. So again, don't necessarily throw them out. There could be some really easy ones for you to meet in this AAA space. And again, they impact a lot of people. They make a better user experience for people. Hopefully that was a review for most of you. Yes? Cool. Good. Any questions on this? Good so far? Okay, great. So with that being said, with the basics of that technical standard in our brains now, I want to talk about the kind of impact areas that the Title II specifics, the specifics in the rule, how they impact us, how they impact our work, and how they'll impact us in the future going forward, in 3 separate areas. So website architecture is one, and this has to do with that archive content conversation. Again, I wanted to highlight this in this talk because I'm getting a ton of questions about it. Anytime regulation or technical standards put out exceptions, people want to try to loophole the exceptions, I've noticed. So I want to head a little bit of that off, but I also want to tell you that don't just ignore the exceptions either, because it is going to be a cost-saving measure for you and a time-saving measure for you to really take this seriously. The exceptions, especially in the archived content space, which we'll get to in the next slide, really will help you reduce the amount of work and the costs that are associated with what's being asked of you. We also are going to talk about remediation governance. Those kind of go hand in hand, the website architecture talk track and the remediation side of things. So how do we prioritize fixing the stuff, the legacy that we inherited from other people? It's inevitable. We have to fix it. We can't throw it all out, right? So how do we start that work? And then the content development as a whole. Again, how do we not make inaccessible content? Does that never reach the people we're trying to serve? That's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this time. I'm not doing too bad. Okay. I timed myself and I went 10 minutes over last night, so we're going to try not to do that. All right. So it's been brought up a couple times, but in the Title II updates, we have an exception for archival content or documents and documents. I am treating them as the same thing. Some people are going to argue with that. They're pulled out separately. I want to treat them the same because, again, I don't want to loophole the exceptions. Documents and web content are so theoretically similar. The technology is different, right? But the point is the same for both of them, that I want to treat them the same. So we're going to talk about them together. If you want to get into the detail about documents versus web content, it is there. It is public information. You can dive into it. Again, not a lawyer. So, but archived web content and documents do not require remediation if they meet certain specifications. And again, this was on a different slide earlier today, but it's worth reiterating because I think it takes some time to really think about what this means. It can be considered archive content if it was created before the rule that of the compliance date, which again is April 24th, 2026. Yeah, okay, for most state and local governments and public facilities. If it's created before that date, if it's reproduced with paper or physical media, let's not talk about that one. Because anytime CD-ROM makes it into legislation, I'm kind of like, I black out a little bit. I don't want to think about it. It is kept for reference only. It is located in a special area for archived content, and that content has not and will not be changed. Those are the criteria for archive, right? I pulled this all from the ADA fact sheet, by the way, highly recommended. It gives you a quick little snapshot of all of this that I'm talking about. So I've linked it at the bottom of my slide here. So one thing I want to talk about now before I forget is if we determine something is archived content, that doesn't mean you can ignore it forever. It does to a point. If somebody requests that document or that web content updated to be accessible and compliant, you have to do it. And then it comes out of the archive and comes back to life in some fashion, right? Maybe a few exceptions to that, but again, you are going to have some internal process for someone to be able to request that information to become accessible, where you're going to pull it out of the archive, remediate it, and put it back out there for them. So can't totally forget about this. But when we're looking at the pile of work in front of us, in order to meet this deadline, we want to shave off this archive if we can, right? Because again, we don't want to remediate everything we've ever created. If it's archival, if it's there just for reference, let's put it aside. But let's put it aside in the way that this is asking us to do. So I want to focus on that one line item here is located in a special area for archived content. Because this might actually change the way you organize your websites. And I don't know how many technical folks are in here, people that manage your CMS or directories, maybe, perhaps. You all probably have access to it. But this may actually change the way you're organizing your file system and your content management system. And I would highly recommend it for your own health and safety, for your own mental health. I think it's a good idea to do this. So I'm going to put these ideas out here that I've talked with some of our customers about in depth. So what does that mean? A special place in that's only for web archived content, right? Easiest answer, if you have the ability to do so, is to move your archived content into its special directory within your file management system that is for archived content and clearly labeled that way, so that everybody that looks at the URL string knows that there's archive in that URL. Easiest way to do it. Again, this is my opinion, but I think this is a good idea because if you determine something is archived content, you leave it where it exists in the mess that is your CMS, because everybody throws documents somewhere in a pile, forgets about it, and we just link to it and go, that's fine. You're not going to remember that that's archived unless you change the document to say archived and then you change the document. And yeah, you can't do that, what we just talked about, right? You can't update the document if it's archived. So move it into a directory, meaning a folder that is specifically for archived web content or documents. Again, once you're past that archive, you can organize it however you want. You can subfolder it, subdirectory it, however you want. But that domain, and then we got a /archive/page or subdirectory is going to save you so much headache going forward as you start making these decisions. There might also be a space, and I've run into this a couple times, where an entire subdomain that you created for a very special project is now archived. You have to keep it up for transparency purposes or funding purposes, but it's really not used, and you've essentially de-indexed it from things like Google and other search engines. So nobody can really find it unless they have a direct URL to it, and you're only keeping it there to prove you used funds correctly, right? That's happened. I've talked with some folks that have had this scenario. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to move an entire website into an archive directory, but you can clearly label the site at the document level that this is archived. So put a big banner across the top that just says this page has been archived and will not be updated. And that populates across every single page of that website. You can even be more specific and say, like, this site was created and archived before the ADA Title II mandate for web content accessibility guidelines 2.1 level AA compliant content. Wordy, I'm not a writer, so sorry. But label that, put that banner at the top of the document, right? So have your web developer put it at the top of the document where it is going to populate across every single page within that website. So anybody coming there knows very clearly, you're not going to update this. It's not going to be updated, and it was made before that deadline occurred. Again, technically someone can request it to be updated. Keep that in mind, technically speaking. So maybe discuss taking it down. We'll get to that part later. Jay's got a question in the back.
I'm so sorry. Clarifying question. Did you say put the archive statement on the document,
Yes.
but you're changing the document?
Changing the template of the website. I'm gonna draw a line there because it's not practical to move an entire site. Good question though. Judy, do you have an answer? I'm actually curious about this.
So I have a little bit cleaner of an answer.
Yeah.
I agree with her analysis of merging the document provisions and the website provisions on archiving. I conceptually in my head think of them as the same because whatever was done before April 24th, 2026.
Yep.
I get the 24th and the 26th
Yeah,
flipped. And then if you look at the 27 compliance date for the small entities, it is the 26th. So don't ask me. Anyway, so a web page, because by archiving it, you're saying it's no longer valid or current information we're using. So you can modify that and put in the header or put on the page archived information. That is okay. A PDF, a Word document, a spreadsheet under the document provisions, because these are two separate provisions. Once you touch it, you're now triggering it. So you need to move that to an archive. That needs to be more of in a section.
Yep.
What I suggest where we're going with this, right? Let's talk handbooks. Everybody have a handbook? Easy sample. Handbooks before your 25, 26 handbook forward should be in one section that says accessible. And then if you have to go backward, put it in the other section. Like the backward stuff say old inaccessible, please contact and be done. It can all be on the same page still. Don't worry about that part. So I think that's the difference. The document, this is where combining them causes a problem, but I agree with you. They're the same in my little head, in my head. So
yeah, okay,
that helps.
Perfect. Yes, that. I'm glad I'm in the same line of thought there as well. And thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, and just I think like the spirit of this rule is not to make you upheave your entire your web presence, right? It's not meant to cost you so much money in moving an entire website architecture into something new. That would be above and beyond like anybody's expectations. So again, this little modification on a website, and I should have made that more clear, maybe that banner on a website that you have archived, not necessarily a document. Document gets a little fuzzier. Don't update, don't touch it. Don't touch the document. All right. And by document, and I see the confusion now, developer brain. Document, I meant the HTML document too. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. All right. Okay. So a couple caveats here to remember, and these have been discussed already, but documents cannot be considered archival if used to apply for, access, or participate in services, programs, or activities. So anything that is related to asking people to apply for any or access any of this, again, keywords, services, programs, and activities cannot fall into this category. So immediately take those out of this thought process you're going to go through. They need to be accessible. They need to be compliant with web content to accessibility guidelines 2.1 level AA, right? Also, password protected individualized documents do not require remediation. I think Dax hit on this earlier, but again, if that document is about a specific person, property, or account, and it is behind some sort of password protected experience or otherwise secured from the general public, that does not need remediation. You can consider that it's not archived, right? But you do not need to spend the time to go backwards in history remediating these. That is not a good use of your time. So why? Because that individual can request an accommodation. So that individual can request an accommodation to have that document, whatever it may be, provided to them in an accessible format. And that alleviates you from needing to globally say this needs to be compliant. Cool. All right, enough about archived content. We good? All right. So let's talk about remediation strategies. Again, this kind of dovetails into that conversation. This is where your thought process, your work is going to come into play. And again, I'm going to approach this from maybe a risk management space, as well as a process improvement place. But this one in particular, remediation strategy, leans into risk management, right? So how do we reduce the amount of work in order to lower the risk of non-compliance? I changed this slide last night. So let's start again, because we just talked about documents, PDFs, and sometimes web content remediation strategy. On the screen, I kind of have a spectrum. On the left side, I have a $1 sign. On the right side, I have $4 signs, meaning least expensive to most expensive choices in your process for determining if you should remediate something, PDF or web content. The web content's a little fits in here. I put it in because I'm like, you can actually use the same thought process for web content. This slide is built for PDFs in truth. But on the least expensive side, so furthest on the left, we have remove outdated and unnecessary documents and web content from your site. If it's outdated, if it is inaccurate, no longer relevant, if it's redundant to other stuff, you don't need it anymore. Take it down. Delete it. Feels good. Just take it out. Again, you're lowering the amount of work you have to do. Delete it. Again, I know there's going to be caveats here because if you're in state and local government, removing stuff from a website is vicious. So take that how you need to within your own process and politics within where you are. But if you can take it down, take it down. My humble advice. Costs very little. Take it down. The next step and the slightly more expensive option is identifying what is archivable. So all those steps we just talked about, that is super low on the spectrum of cost. And cost can be time, cost can be dollars, cost can be your sanity, whatever. So if we can identify what can be archived, we're taking it out of the list of what needs to be remediated. And that's huge. That's going to save you so much time. So again, if you're never going to update it again, and I would also consider traffic. If you know people are not coming to it and never will use it, or highly unlikely that they will use it, again, archive it. If you think people are going to still get there, you have sporadic traffic, I might push it up another level. I might not consider it archived content because the risk is higher if people are finding it, right? If people are finding it, that means robots are finding it and people can do some sort of like basic check on it and say that's not compliant, and again, get you and ask for it even if they don't necessarily need it. So consider the traffic to that document as well. But if nobody's coming to it, you're never going to update it. Have a process for somebody to request it to be accessible, then move it, once you update it, move it back out of that archive. But that's going to be your next option. Next step, for documents specifically, convert it to HTML. Does it need to be a document? How many documents have you seen that could have easily been a very simple website? Yes, we've seen it before. Yes. I see it every day. So there's very few things that need to be a PDF. There are very few things that need to be any sort of document out there. CMSs, and I'm going to generalize here, but CMSs have gotten so good at making content editing simple. Anybody can make an HTML website through these content management systems. Is it great? Probably not. Might need some guidance, might need some education. But I can guarantee you it is going to be easier to deal with the HTML that a content management system kicks out than an untagged PDF. So don't use documents when you don't have to. Convert it to HTML. Awesome. And then the most expensive, the $4 signs in this spectrum, is remediate. It is always going to be the most expensive thing for you to do, if that's web content or documents or anything, truthfully, because you've already spent all the money to create it. It's wrong. You're taking it down and you're going to recreate it again. So you're doing it twice. You're paying for it twice. We want to avoid that at all possible. So again, remediate is the most expensive part of this entire strategy and of this entire system. You want to do everything possible to reduce the amount of things you want to remediate. I get a lot of questions currently about if there's an AI service that we can just send every single document through in order to remediate it in bulk. Awesome, repost it to our content management system, and then we're done. Absolutely not. Like, no, that doesn't exist. I would say it's fraught with danger. I think like the remediation you're going to get back is going to be not good. It's still going to have issues, and it's going to be extraordinarily expensive to purchase that system in order to do it. And it's not going to have the outcome you want. So again, remediation of documents and web content, your last choice in the spectrum. Cool. All right. So talked a little bit about the strategy for the things you know that need to be addressed. I couldn't not talk about a hybrid testing methodology that you need to incorporate. So with documents, with web content, all of it, you need to do manual testing. You need to have humans investigate the content you are making in some fashion. I'm not saying manually test every single thing. That's exorbitant time and space wise. But you need to approach it with the automated testing for scale. That enterprise view, I think Rob said earlier. The automated testing gives you a pulse on everything across all of your assets. And the manual testing, you can deep dive into very strategic places. And we'll talk about what that priority might be for you, maybe not. But you need to have manual testing. The reason you need to have manual testing in order to make, in order to meet the minimum technical standard for Title II of the ADA, all the updates that just came through, you have to have manual testing because there's no automated tool out there that can do 100%. There's none. I would distrust it heavily as well because a machine is not a human and a human has to do testing for human understandability, right? So manual testing for that deep dive. Manual testing is the only way to cover 100% of the WCAG success criterion that are being asked of you as the minimum technical standard for the ADA Title II. Yes? How many of, quick show of hands or verbalization, how many of you do any sort of manual testing today? I see some hands. Okay. The rest of you, I'm curious, or do you not do manual testing because you don't know how, or is it just a time and space problem? Anybody brave want to tell me? No is okay. That's fine. Okay. Maybe it's a lack of awareness. That's fine. Maybe lack of understanding what we need to do there. I'm not asking you to all go learn how to be a screen reader tester. There's a huge learning curve to that. But there are certain things in a manual test you could do yourself that could help that process and at least get you some of the way to accessible, right? To fully conform it. But again, highly recommend finding a way to do some sort of manual testing for that depth. You need both. You need the automated and you need the manual testing together is the goal. This is going to uncover the rest of your, especially in the web content, that you're creating, the issues that align with what's the minimum requirement is for the Title II update. It's going to give you a ton of data, right? And so we're gonna have, it's overwhelming. We're gonna have a moment of panic because we're gonna see all the issues, because we just talked about documents and that whole strategy in the process, and that was scary already, right? Now we've got all of this other data based on maybe code changes that need to happen. Maybe it's limitations with our CMS that get uncovered with this. We're just gonna have a pile of issues now. And again, we're not even in the part of this talk to start talking about the future. We're still dealing with the technical debt that we inherited some other place, right? So I'm a bummer today. I'm real sorry. But we got a pile of information. So now how do we prioritize the existing issues that we found? We did automated testing, we did manual testing. We have considered our document strategy, and we've found the documents that we need to remediate and other web content that may exist out there. My prioritization metrics are going to be different than some of the other ones you've seen here in the last couple days. Again, I'm coming from maybe a risk management space with this, because meeting the deadline is going to be difficult. We only have, what was it, 14 months till that deadline occurs. We're not going to get done. But we need to make progress. We need to show trajectory towards it. I shouldn't say we're not going to get done. You might. Hopefully you do. Okay. But so how I would prioritize this amount of data, we found those issues, we found those documents. High focus on the high traffic pages first, because the majority of your users are coming to them. They are, again, high traffic. The more people you have, the more risk you have in that. And likely it's more important to you and your company and your business, because you're driving traffic there. So prioritize those that high in the list, in my opinion. You don't want to start with the pages no one visits. You just don't. They're pretty low risk as it exists. Next in my list is dynamic or interactive pages, and this one's a little interesting. I get mixed reactions when I tell people this one, because if you spent the time, effort, money to develop a highly dynamic or interactive page, it's likely very important to you in some way, or you convinced somebody, you did some magic convincing somebody to spend the time to make this dynamic page, something that has high developer cost to it. If you spent that time and money on it, you're likely driving a lot of traffic to it. You're likely asking a lot from your users in it to interact with it, or heavy engagement within that. So we need to make sure that that engagement is for everyone, right? There's anytime we add interactivity or dynamic nature into anything we're making, it increases the amount of work and thought and implementation for making it accessible, just by the nature of like developers and how they work, right? Like there's different coding standards. It's not as easy as semantic HTML sometimes. There's more work involved. So again, prioritize those high. You spent money on it, make it accessible. And then, and this is an easy one, but I also prioritize by WCAG level, so that single A and double A, when you find those issues, especially in your automated or manual test, choose the A's first. Sometimes you'll find like a mixture or a hybrid of them, but choose the A's first. And I guess this should be like a comma with things that are within your control, because if you are finding coding issues that stem from your content management system and that's outside of your control, that's not going to be helpful for you. So what's within your control, level single A, level double A, unless those are in the same component, in which case you might want to take them at the same time. But if you're looking at a pile of issues, and I'm talking like 10,000 issues across the site, this is an easy mechanism to start sifting through the work. And the A's are going to be the most blocking for your end user. So, and then lastly, but still important, templated components. Again, this is maybe more of a developer or technical person ask or prioritization. This might be higher on your list, especially if you manage the templates of your organization. But if we are using components or templates that populate across many, many pages of our website, we find accessibilities within issues within them. We should prioritize those because we can fix them hopefully in one place and they will populate across many pages, right? So if we can prioritize those templated fixes or component libraries or design libraries, again, that's just bang for your buck, right? You're going to knock out more accessibility issues in these templated systems if we address those higher in the prioritization list. Any questions so far? We good? Yeah. I think I only have 15 minutes left, right? Okay. Oh, got a question in the back.
So this is for you or maybe any presenter who has ideas on it, but are we seeing any trends from organizations, institutions getting third-party software systems, that kind of thing, to going back to building proprietary systems in-house because of this?
That's a great question. Yeah. I can say I've seen two sides of that. I have seen certain organizations go away from third-party systems, especially, I don't know if there's any WordPress developers in the space, but WordPress plugins can be really traumatic for the process, is maybe the word I want to use. So WordPress plugins in particular, I've seen a migration away from them where they are going to invest the time and effort to build their own components for those systems. Again, though, that is determined upon the structure of your organization. Do you have developers available? Can you hire someone to do that work? You may not have that option. So there is the second side of that I've seen a lot of people and organizations actually highly engage with the third party to start bugging them. And that's not always possible. Like, you can go complain to Google Maps all day and they're not going to change. But you can start submitting tickets, especially for some small organizations, and especially if your organization has any amount of like power in a large contract format. They're going to be highly receptive to taking bugs and bug reports. It's just a management problem on your side, unfortunately. So I've seen kind of those two spaces. But the good news is people are taking it seriously, especially now that we have a technical standard identified. There's a lot of ramifications to it. So people are, oh, and Jay has something to add, hopefully.
I remind you all that almost all of you have organizations that belong to association.
Yes.
Leverage those associations. Those associations, is this, they have lobbyists. That's what associations do. Tell them this is the priority. The association need to talk to, you identify the 1, 2, or 3 companies they use for your CMS or whatever, you go after them. And build a relationship. They'll see a benefit to getting more customers.
Yes, if your organization A has a large contract with that vendor that you can put the sway and the fear in them that you're going to cancel, do that. If you have lobbyists, if you have organizations that are associated with you that can go fight that battle, absolutely pull those levers too. People are taking it seriously. This is affecting everyone. This is not going to go away. So, great. Question.
I have a question in the chat. It says, if a company has a PDF form that's not accessible, but it's a link on an accessible HTML form version that's exactly the same, does that meet compliance?
I mean, it's redundant, but it's not a good idea. That's maybe not an official answer. I think it's still risky, right? Because you're assuming that someone's going to be able to connect the two. So unless there's a very direct way that those two things are connected, like you're in the PDF and there's a link directly to that web form. Thank you, Judy. I think you're hoping that people are going to find the two things and know that they're the same. I would vastly prefer web form That's my consultant advice.
I agree with you 110%. I'm not going to say anything else because
Okay.
there are PDF lovers that love them. No, there is something to say. So maybe it's okay. Maybe it's not. We don't know the answer. In the Title II regs, so this is still not in effect, it's coming. So let me step back. In WCAG, there's some provisioning on conforming alternative versions. So you can do exactly that. It's fine. In the Title II regs, they explicitly say you really can't do conforming alternative versions. So under the Title II regs, there's a possibility that you can't do this and you could get into trouble. We just don't know yet. I think it's okay under the regs because the primary version is the accessible version. The secondary version is the inaccessible. And there may be a reason you want the secondary version. I don't like it. But the reason you do it is because someone has to fill it out and they don't want to put their credit card online, or it's much easier to send a check. They want to print the form and send the check. So
That's
there
fair.
are reasons to do it.
Yep.
But I'm 100% on page with you. And
Yeah.
there's a Title II hitch in that. So that's what
Yes.
concerns me.
And I would absolutely double down on the recommendation that the only place that you can find that document is the form, so that the form is the first thing and the web form is the first thing and the document is the second thing. And they should be linked right there. And that should be the only place they can find it, hopefully. I'm very hesitant on duplicate content. So thank you, Judy. Appreciate that. Again, just for management purposes and risk analysis, you should not do that. Try something else. Go for the web form. Okay, I got a couple more slides here. So now I got a couple minutes, but now we're going to talk about the future. So once April 24th, 2026 hits, do you remember that first slide about the archived content? Right? It said something about made before the deadline. What happens after the deadline? Anyone? Any new content has to be made compliant to WCAG level 2.1 AA standards. There is no exception past the date that this goes into effect. There's no exception except for your previously created archived content. So that goes for web, that goes for documents, that goes for everything. So so why is that? It's because your remediation efforts will never decrease if we continue to create inaccessible content. That is going to be a cost to you forever if we don't stop. And the reason that these rules came into play is to not allow that anymore, right? So we don't want to keep having that cost. We don't want to keep having that barrier to people. It is essentially saying, yes, there's remediation effort, but we're also changing the process in which you create content so that going forward, the content you create is accessible. So this is not just a remediation effort that it's asking for. It's change the way you do stuff, right? My easiest answer. This is the easy answer slide that I added very late last night. Very ugly, I'm sorry. Design decisions, right? You can distribute this to all the people who do content work for you. Even if you have a distributed network of content editors, make easy choices. That's it. If you are in the process of thinking about what content you're going to make, there are easy choices you can make that are automatically more accessible. So if you're thinking about a PDF, don't make it an HTML document. End of story. If you are thinking about how you're going to display text on a website, and you're like, ooh, I'll just make a JPEG. I'll just make an image of text or not maybe a diagram, but like just text. It's just prettier when I make it an image. Don't do that. Make it plain text. There are things we can do to style plain text in an HTML document. It doesn't need to be an image. It's so much more difficult to make an image accessible than it is plain text. Make an easy decision. Yes? Single sensory indicators. This one's a little more difficult conceptually, but when you're making content, think about what you're doing. And are you asking for a single human sense to be able to understand that. So color has been used a lot here. If I turn a circle red, is red the only indicator that something happened? That's a problem. We need to describe it in some other way. We need some sort of text or addition to that. Again, easy choices, right? Don't rely just on color. Don't rely on shape. I used to work in an online university, and instructional designers would come and make this content for like supplemental learning material. And they would say something like, click the green button. What's a green button? Like, if you don't perceive the color green, that's irrelevant. If you can't see the visuals in the screen, that is irrelevant. If you are asking somebody to go to the left corner of something, left is irrelevant if you are not referencing the visuals of the document. So make better choices in how you are communicating your instructions or your content in general. And then text styling, already hit upon, but if you're styling text and you're making it bold and bigger, that should be a heading, right? Heading structure is exactly an outline structure. Your content editors already know what an outline looks like. So just copy the outline structure into your heading structure. If you're finding yourself using that panel to style text, convert that into a heading, right? A meaningful heading in a logical sequence, and it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Can't be much simpler. Just do it. Easy decisions. All right, got a couple minutes, sorry. I want to hit this one and then we're done. But I want to talk about the content development lifecycle very briefly. I do a whole 2-hour workshop on this. We're not going to go there today. But this is essentially the process. It's a generic process. Yours might not look exactly like this, but this is generally speaking the content development lifecycle. It's also the software development lifecycle if you're a nerd like me. We have the stages in a linear format of discover and then design, develop, test, launch, and maintain. All in a line, linear, going left to right. We also have these arrows that come back from other stages backwards. So for instance, we have one coming back from maintain all the way back to discover. We have test back to develop, develop back to design, and so forth. And for every stage throughout that. Let's not get in the details. But this content development lifecycle can work on any stage, any scale. This could be each step in this process is a wholly staffed team. I've worked in a situation like this before. We have an entire team that does planning. In discovery phase, we have a design team, we have a development team, and we're just handing off assets through this. This process could also work in a single human being, right? It could be your process that you use to do content development. It may not look exactly like this, but it can live in a single human being's mind as well, right? What I want you to take away from this is that there are easy decisions at each and every one of these stages that makes accessible content. And this is what, tying it back to Title II, this is what we're asking to do going forward. We need to make easy decisions to make sure that when we get to that launch stage, we're not making inaccessible content, that we're covering our bases, or not putting it all on one person. Even if this lives in one person's brain, hopefully delegate, right? But we want to make sure that we're making those easy decisions in each of these stages, that when we get to test and launch very minor things that we're finding, we fix them, we launch it, we're good, we're compliant, right? The note at the bottom here, the longer the line backwards in this process, the more expensive it is. Again, if we go through this entire linear process, we're spending time, money, resources, effort, mental capacity, all the way through this line. And if we get to launch, and then we're in maintenance and we say, ooh, our automated check system found new errors in that new content we just created, we now have to take it all the way back. We already did all the work. We spent all the money. And now we have to take it all the way back to the start and do it again. Incredibly expensive. So what Title II is asking you to do, especially going forward from April 24, 2026, is Think about, have this process in place. Make the easy decisions at each one of these places in order to lower your risk and make sure you're putting out accessible content. So we're not having to spend so much money going forward. Yes. You got a 2-hour workshop in 5 minutes. So last slide, be proactive, educate your teams, choose some easy answers, easy solutions in each one of those steps. Get them the training that they need if you have that ability to do so. If not, there's a ton of free resources out there that have already been mentioned, but please do take them. The fact that you are here is proof enough that you are interested in this and passionate about it. So educate, pass on the knowledge, right? Build a process to govern. So that's that hybrid testing model. That is that maintenance model, strategy model that you need to be considering and continue to consider going forward. And then use technology to monitor, right? Make sure you have something in place that is telling you easy to reach things, right? Keeping an eye on what you're producing so that when we get to that date, we know any content that's going out the door is accessible. And if it's not, easy solutions, smaller volume to fix, right? Wonderful. So again, I'm Christina Adams. I'm a manager of digital accessibility at Site Improve. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd have to bounce to the airport probably in a little bit, but I'll hang around for a while. Minnesota, I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We just got 9 inches of snow. So I get to go home to that. But please do, this QR code up on the screen is my LinkedIn. I think it's Christina-Adams-developer. If not, just email me, come find me. I'll give you the QR code. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say thank you again to be allowed to speak to you all and be in this room of very passionate people. I think this is an impressive event. This is impressive participation. And amazing folks at Tech Access, Able Tech, for putting this on and pulling the speakers together for this event. Because Rob, 150 years-ish of experience in digital, 152 years of digital accessibility experience across all the speakers in 2 days. I don't think you're gonna find that. And I've been at these types of events for a while. So you're not gonna find that most places. So this is pretty incredible. So thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. But please do find me if you have any questions. Appreciate it. Oh, sorry, question, hey.
Is it working? There we go.
Yes.
So I'm an academic librarian and I'm going to go ahead and ask my question, but if it's going to get complicated, I'm happy to stay after and
Great.
talk about it more. So I don't work directly with our institutional repository, but I work closely with those people. And so my question relates to the archived content exception. The sticking point that I'm having conceptually is with existing content in that repository, because it is content that, with rare exceptions, is being uploaded into the repository and will not be updated. Like I said, rare exceptions where content may need to be updated for one version or another. However, the intention behind the repository is for that content to be available for access and reuse. So I'm not sure whether that content that is currently in the repository would be exempt under the new Title II rules, or if we need to be prepared to work on remediating that content as well.
Judy, I might need you. I might need you. I would say that if it is, I would ask if it's there for reference alone, or if it's like actionable in any way.
So this is hard. This is like a weird wording, right? Here's my answer. Data analytics, data analytics, data analytics. If it's truly just archived, no one's looking at and using it,
Right.
leave it.
Yep.
It's fine. And like, look, you're getting 1 hit a year, probably going to be fine. Put notice out, we'll be fine. When you start getting into 10 hits a month, risk every more hit you get
Yep.
every day, your risk goes up. So I joke, right? An old school board meeting, where an old video of a school board meeting would not need to be captioned, it's exempt, but there's a fist fight in it. And it's, you all laughing, and it's downloaded and accessed 18 times a day. That needs captioning.
Yeah.
So just so it's data analytics, data analytics, data analytics. If it's not being used, that is truly what fits in the archive.
Yeah.
I'll do the running.
I'm really glad you said that, because I was gonna say, if it's not being used, leave it to be remediated when it's requested.
And I'll clarify, a lot of the stuff that goes in our repository is stuff like conference posters, conference presentations, preprints of articles. So it's material that has a lot of potential for frequent access and reuse.
Okay. Yeah. If again, that
I
high
go-
risk,
I
high
go
risk
back
situation.
to
Yeah.
analytics, like it's just how free, and if something there have been websites, I don't want to get too specific, but there are websites like they're not used. And then like students get a project and like everybody studies X in the state at this time, and the website use skyrockets in April every year, and then it's dead the rest of the year. That is still high use.
Yes.
We need to look
Definitely.
at longitudinal data. So there's no answer. This is not, and this is the frustration. This is not a science and exact and precise, and we need to be exact and precise with the law, but we need to
Yep.
also have data behind us. If you're saying it's only accessed 4 times a year, you're fine with it being archived.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, let's make an easy rule. And I think Christina's going to agree with me. What website are you going to, like, one of your priorities of what website you're going to remediate first is the highest frequency use.
Correct. It should be because for
what we-
risk, right? Because of the more people coming at it, the more people are going to have a negative experience. The more likely you are having assistive technology users be there. So just simply that, right? That's why I would push for it. But I would also like to say, for the seasonality aspect, don't just look at your data for traffic in this prioritization scheme in just the last month. Look at it across the whole year, because there are certain instances where you're going to have high usage one month and then none the rest of the year, right? So if it's getting consistent traffic once a year, that is still high risk in my opinion. Sorry, did you have something? Go ahead.
Gee,
Yeah.
you should take me to CSUN with you next week.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Great. Okay. Again, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.